Usually I like to identify myself by ethnicity and not really race. So I wouldn't say that I'm black. I more likely would say I'm Jamaican, because I really think it's important for people to know my ethnicity, because I feel like when you say black, you kind of just get lumped in with a lot of different people.
I'm a woman and I am Asian. And I guess those are like the most visible identities, which is why they feel the most important to me.
Student, husband, maybe like burgeoning academic.
I have these two, not always conflicting, but at some points, especially earlier in my life, American and Indian as kind of separate, and bringing them together and being an Indian American.
I identify internally very differently than I think the world views me necessarily, like when I'm just walking down the street, and I think those are two important aspects of identity.
I identify myself as a venture capitalist, opportunist, sales and trading associate with Credit Suisse First Boston, Fordham Prep, and Columbia University graduate, African American Dominican male from the South Bronx, New York, Holla.
I know there are still barriers and biases out there, often unconscious, and I want to build an America that respects and embraces the potential of every last one of us.
I was always made fun of for all the Asian stereotypes just because I was intelligent. But that wasn't because I was Asian, I was a hard worker. So I think just being an intelligent woman and as well as being Asian, I think I'm always made aware of my identities.
And I'm out or whatever, and not the majority of people are not like gay people, or the majority of people are in heterosexual like relationships, I think, more, or at like campus bars and stuff, I think, which totally fine, but I think I'm probably made aware of it when a guy will come up and hit on me.
If I'm with a group of all girls, sometimes I'm more aware of my male identity, in which case I'm usually not, but generally I'm not as aware of that, I don't think.
Definitely on campus, especially around my group of friends, just because I really don't have Hispanic friends, so I'm very much made aware of my identity when I'm surrounded by my friends, just because I'm the only one of my ethno-racial group and our close group of friends.
I think more or less when I'm in classes, and I just happen to look around and I just see a lot of Caucasians and not a high percentage of minority meaning pretty much white Hispanics, not necessarily Asian.
When I work at Barnard, and as a male, I think I become very aware of being male.
Have you ever felt uncomfortable with one of your identities?
Not at all, but I can see how somebody would feel uncomfortable with their identity. People, well, that's a different question, but I guess the most uncomfortable thing about my identity is being a very large black man in a city where police are very racist and aggressive.
I actually wasn't aware of so many, this is gonna sound so rooted, but just privileges that I have from being straight or having only dated straight people. But at the same time, it also feels like I can try to relate and support my friends, but at the same time, I don't really have personal experiences that can really that can really connect me to them, and so there is still that barrier.
Babysitting, I think it's very interesting because all of the children that I babysit tend to be white. So here in Manhattan, a lot of the demographics with babysitters are either West Indies babysitters, African American, or Latino babysitters. So you definitely, if you fall within one of those categories, you're very much made aware that you're the babysitter and you're babysitting a white kid.
He grabbed my elbow and said, "Hey, Asian girl." And that itself was really offensive to me because he, first of all, called me out as a girl, and but in a very not in a kind way, and also to use my ethnicity to try and like hit on a person, that was just very rude.
I don't think any particular moment comes in mind where I was uncomfortable with one of my identities, but I really don't think there's any time.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I am agreed.
Telling her that her hair was so pretty, she had really pretty bluish green eyes, and this girl who I guess must have known her prior came to her and said, like, Heather, don't sit next to her because she's black. And that was the first time that I think I ever had my feelings hurt in terms of being like a different race from everyone else.
I think I've sort of known my whole life there wasn't like a, aha, this is who you are. And I think it's something that'll continue to change throughout my life. How I feel about myself is how I identify. And like, what I choose to tell people will continue to change throughout my life.
Well, my family's in Bombay, and Bombay is just so different from anything here. Some stuff as viscerally as like the smell and the crowds, and just that all of a sudden just jars you and be like, wow, I'm not at home anymore. And if home felt like an Indian home, then it's no longer really an Indian home, because this is an Indian home and this is not what I expected.
My grandmother sort of raised myself and her other grandsons to really recognize this, like, look, you know, you're Chippewa, and therefore X, Y, and Z, and here's what you should know. But at school, my friends sort of were like, no, you're clearly not.
I am technically a Hispanic. My family is from Mexico, but I would never be a white Hispanic. We have indigenous traces. I am a very dark-skinned Latino person, and I think it's very interesting to see that dichotomy within the Hispanic category.
When living in California, I don't think I ever like really identified myself as anything, but coming to Barnard College, I really embraced my identities. I really embraced the fact that I am a woman of color, and I try to be empowered by it.
When there are groups for, you know, people of color or women of color, I feel that, I don't know, I always feel like I'm not supposed to enter that space, because I guess in some ways I feel that having not grown up here and also like being from just like an international student, I didn't grow up in a community where like we defined ourselves by people of color. And so I think that partly plays into why I don't know if I'm welcome in that community.
When I was about 4 or 5, I looked in the mirror, knew who I was, and that was my identity. Been the same person ever since.
In certain situations, I'm often aware of certain identities more than others, or identities that I just completely even forgot about that is part of who I am, don't come out in other ways.
Depending on who you are, where you are, who you're speaking to, and who you're with definitely makes a difference. Like, for instance, when I'm in church and I'm with my friends, I have a tendency to use a lot more Spanish, and maybe even if I don't use a lot more Spanish, I have a tendency to probably have an accent.
I go back to California and I go back home, I speak with my accent, and I'm very comfortable to speak that way. I rarely do it at school. I try really hard not to, and a lot of times it's just instinct. It's like New York, speak with my American accent. California, I can speak whichever way I want. So I do, in different scenarios, I do change the way I speak.
Identity is more of a process of flux that's willing to embrace these kind of internally contradictory, these fragmented kind of experiences, and not necessarily force them into kind of one oneness or one sameness, but instead to explore the possibilities and where they kind of bend and break.
There's a college on a hilltop that's very dear to me, and a certain group of students with ties of camaraderie. So we'll sing to dear old Barnard, and loyal be and true, as we show to coming classes how we love the white and blue. When the day has come for parting and college days are o'er, there will always be a fondness for the good old days of yore. And we'll sing to dear old Barnard, as in memory we see the college on a hilltop where our classmates used to be.
Where I've come from, where I am now, and where I'm going to be going.
I think there's this fluidity with identity.